Okay. Put the X on there.
Hello, who do we have joining us on the phone?
I'm Susie Williams.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon. Hello, Chairman.
Good afternoon.
How are you all?
We're fine.
Good.
Who just joined us via phone?
It's Kid Harris.
Hello, Commissioner Harris.
Hello. How you doing, Chairman? Oh, hey, Robbie.
Robbie's on here too.
Hey,
Hey,
Rob.
guys.
buddy.
Robbie.
Hey, everybody.
Susan, if you'll let me know when you think everybody has joined us, we'll get started here soon.
I think we've got everyone, but we do not have Commissioner Jones. There she is.
No.
Mm-mm. All right, I think everyone's here.
Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of the Washington County Board of County Commissioners here on March 31st. This will be a special called emergency meeting of the County Commission. All in session. First order of business this evening is, I guess, to have everyone first mute their mics, and that way it'll keep a lot of the background noise off. And you'll have to raise your hand when you speak. I guess our very first order of business is our prayer. Commissioner Carriger, would you ask our prayer this evening for us?
Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to, and I'm sure everybody will join with their heads bowed. But let's all bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for the love you have shown us. We thank you for the grace that you have shown us. We ask that you be with your people in this time of great need. We ask that you strengthen us, that you love us, and that you put your comforting arms around us. And may we always remember that we do things in the way that you would want us to do, with love and compassion. We ask that you strengthen us to thy service. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner
You're
Ford,
welcome.
would you mind to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
Let's honor America. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Allegiance to the flag.
of America. To the republic
Which is
for which it stands,
Which stands one nation, under God.
Justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Ford. Madam Clerk, are you with us? Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. White. Harris.
Here.
Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Edens.
Here.
Davenport.
Here.
Matherly.
Here.
England.
Here.
Malone.
Here.
Williams.
Here.
Carrigan.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Tester.
Here.
McAllister.
Here.
Wheeler.
Here.
Ford.
Here.
14 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a very short agenda this evening, only 2 items. And before we do that, though, I would like to remind you, Governor Lee's order number 16 regarding conducting county business remotely by electronic means to the greatest extent possible sets out the need for county governing bodies to continue to meet and to carry out essential functions. And this meeting has been called in conjunction with the board's rules, specifically Rule 1, which provides that if an emergency should arise, the board shall meet at 6 p.m. the following day. So, one of the things that I think we first need to discuss this evening, our rules say that this is a requirement of us to do, and the governor's order is essential function. So, I don't know if anybody has any comment on that, but if not, we will move forward. Again, I ask you to just stay muted. And if you'd like to speak at any time, just go ahead and indicate that by the button where it says to raise your hand, or if you're on the call, I'll be sure and ask you, or just call out to me. I surely don't want to miss you. We do have the agenda, and the first item this evening. Let me get back over to my page. I've got a few too many screens. So I guess our first item this evening is determination of essential functions of governing body requiring meetings. And this was one of our rules in Rule 1. I felt like I carried out our meeting for us to meet as soon as possible after emergency was declared. And is there any questions or comment about that before we move on to any other item?
I'm just curious, this is Jody, if it's okay for me to speak. I'm just wondering what the intention of that rule is. I'm guessing it's so that the commission can support like local declaration of emergency, or like what's the intention of the rule?
Well, the rule just says that we would call into session and meet. I guess to find out more information about the emergency or to what extent that applies to. I think I would feel better if our county attorney weighed in on that question just a little bit and broke that down for us.
Let me make sure. Okay, thank you. I was just making sure you can hear me. I think that I would direct you, Commissioner Jones, to look at the language in the rule, which is that a meeting shall be called. I wouldn't want you to be looking at the intent of the rule, which is outside of the way it's expressed. And that's just using the plain meaning of the language that says, should any emergency arise, the board shall meet at 6 p.m. on the following day or as soon thereafter as possible. And you've got these 2 items for consideration on your agenda. And I think that you have wide berth to consider them as you see fit based on the circumstances in front of you today. Does that help?
It does. And I would just say that it feels like it would be a good thing for our commission to learn what we can to support constituents in following the emergency declaration and this call if that information can be discussed. Sounds like we're going to discuss that, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Is there any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the next item. The next item is the executive order declaring a local state of emergency in Washington County, Tennessee. I know that you all have had an opportunity to review that. It was sent out previously or this afternoon. I guess I'll just open the floor up for discussion or questions, or if you would like the mayor to go ahead and bring us up to date on where we are. Mayor, why don't you do that first and just go ahead and just kind of give us a brief update there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tell you, there's a lot that has transpired over the last couple of weeks, and I'll just have to say that we have pretty much daily briefings with the emergency management group, a group of physicians locally, as the pandemic has spread across the country and specifically across Tennessee. Literally for the last 3 weeks, it's consumed the vast majority of my time, as well as folks at 911 emergency management. We've all worked really hard to do that. So, as I'm sure you're all aware, the president declared a national state of emergency. The governor declared a state of emergency in the state. So, a lot of the activity that has taken place over this last 3 weeks has been a result of being able to operate under the authority of those actions. So the emergency management, the EOC was stood up, really now a little over 2 weeks ago, and part of that work is in an effort to begin to track and monitor and manage the time and expenses and so forth that have gone into this effort. So part of that work involves the schools as they are providing school lunches, literally thousands of school lunches per week at 8 different sites in the county. All the volunteer hours and all the additional costs that is related to that, if tracked and monitored and submitted to FEMA after this pandemic is past us, as the governor described it today in the call to the mayors. So there's a storm over Tennessee. There's a storm over Tennessee right now, but the storm's moving, and there'll be a time when the storm is past. And so for us, in the aftermath of that, it's important to be able to have the records to support all the cost and expense that we are able to capture for reimbursement, because obviously everyone knows this is very expensive. So under those two declarations, we operated really until just this past week. So we've watched as municipalities and local counties and governments and so forth across the state have reacted to changing medical conditions in their county. Daily, I've been receiving, as has many of our emergency management people in the community, information from our local state health officials, professional health folks at Ballot Health, as well as ETSU in the physicians group, as they have ramped up the testing of local citizens, for this virus. Been very challenging, and I'm sure you have read in the paper or seen on the news that the test kits were slow to come. The test results, once the tests are made, have ranged anywhere from getting the results back in 24 hours to, in some cases, over 7 days. So the local health people, and it's obvious, I'm sure, to everyone, I'm not a medical person. So my information has been completely reliant on that information from our local health folks. A team of people that have really met and worked around the clock for virtually the past 3 weeks, monitoring the condition. So the positive tests that were reported in Washington County and in the surrounding counties up until last Thursday had all been directly related to travel out of the area. The cases have been monitored, they've been tracked. As cases have been reported and confirmed positive, the travel history and so forth of these individuals has been monitored. Maybe this is more information than you want, but this is sort of the progression of what's taken us to where we are today. So all of that changed about the middle of last week. And while there was it was call from numerous people locally to react and to do more than what the governor's orders were dictating for us, our local health officials were resolute on the fact that it wasn't time to pull the trigger. That changed about Thursday last week when positive cases in our area began to change from these travel-related cases to those cases that were spread from person to person within our community. Sometimes you hear that referred to as community spread. So once that documentation was in place, then the health officials very quickly changed their position from let's monitor and see where we're going with this to it's time to act and to enforce and to work with the community in a more stringent fashion with respect to staying at home, social distancing, washing your hands, and all those other things that have been communicated across the community for the past 3 weeks. So we began to work sort of diligently. I just say that I probably have 1 to 3 conversations with City Manager Johnson City a day, have for the last 3 weeks as we've watched the progression of this virus in our community. So once the health officials basically said, hey, we need a higher level of action from local government, we began to realize it was important to take these actions. So part of what was required in order to get some additional order in place and directive for the community was an emergency action. We worked on the documentation for this through the weekend and yesterday issued state of emergency local for Washington County, as did a number of our other local counties, Sullivan, Greene, Unicoi, Carter, Johnson, have all done about the same thing, and then issued a declaration of safer at home, which was a term that sort of was, I think, initially used in Davidson County and has been used in numerous counties across the state since then to direct citizens to stay at home unless they were out on essential business. And that essential business was defined in a document that was issued on March 19th by the Homeland Security of the United States, and specifically the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and where they set out guidelines for what businesses are critical, essential, and so forth. And that's the list of businesses that just about everybody has relied on since. So, Mr. Chairman, that's sort of where we were, where we are as of this time yesterday afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Is there I guess we'll go ahead and if anyone has some questions for the mayor, we'll go ahead and fill those now. Unless we'd like for the attorney to address anything of this emergency order. Was there anything that you wanted to address before we get started, Allison, as far as these two emergency orders would go?
No, sir, but I'm happy to answer any questions if there are specifics.
Thank you. Commissioner Harris, did you have any questions?
Can you hear me, Chairman?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. No, I heard everything well. I guess one thing that I think that I have seen, though, is that all of our county employees are being taken care of, and I noticed the school system had voted to pay all their people, and even if they go on, I guess, restricted things, and I just wanted to make sure that I spoke to the mayor, I guess, maybe a week or 10 days ago, and just making sure that we're been able to take care of all of our employees during all this stuff. And I know some of them are working different shifts. Could you explain a little bit of that to me so I'll sort of know what's going on with that, Mr. Mayor?
Yes. All right. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Yeah, that's, there's certainly, one of our highest priorities in the county. The school board took care of the school employees in the way that you described. And, I'll just say that, across, not just our employees, but across people in general in the community, people are scared and they're anxious, they're fearful. This is a big unknown about exactly what the impact will be. I picked up the paper the day before yesterday and read the headline that said that the chief medical official that the president of the United States is relying on has indicated that could have as many as 100,000 or 200,000 deaths in the United States before this is over with. And that, I really haven't been able to get that out of my mind. And I'm sure, like you, a lot of us have sleepless nights worried about it. We'll so have 500 or so Washington County employees. So all the actions that we have taken today, closing the courthouse to outside people coming in and just trying to conduct the county's business that's important to our local businesses as best we could without face-to-face contact. I'd say it's gone well, and all the folks have cooperated. Where office holders have chosen to allow shift work and that type of thing, all county employees to date are being paid, whether they're being asked to stay at home and shelter in place, that's a work assignment, or whether they're asked to, be in the office, actually doing paperwork and answering the phone and doing other things. So where all of that has taken place, everyone is being paid. That answers the question.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I just wanted to make sure that we were still on that, and I think that we've got some of the best employees around. We got to take care of them, so I appreciate you doing that. That's all I've got, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. Commissioner Tester, did you have any questions?
Hello, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you good.
I guess my questions have more to do with the Safer at Home directive than they necessarily do the executive order. So
Okay.
I can wait till we get to that, I guess.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that one. Was there anything else on the declaration that you had questions on or comments or?
No, but I will just say that I think it was last week I talked to Mayor Grandy and I felt like a lot of the things that were done were reasonable, and I know we're in uncharted territory here, and as he said a few minutes ago, a lot of people are afraid and anxious, and people are losing their jobs and all kinds of stuff. So it's a crazy time. And I talked to him today on the phone about some things, which I guess I'll get to later, but he said everybody's trying to do their best, and I can appreciate that. I know, I think we can understand that everybody is, and it's just a very trying, difficult time for everybody. So I'll leave it at that for now. I appreciate everybody's effort.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. We sure do appreciate everybody being able to be on this call almost tonight. Commissioner Williams, did you have any questions?
No, I read all the documents that came through by email, and also, of course, it was also in the paper today.
Yes, ma'am.
I understand.
Thank you. Commissioner Carragher?
No questions.
Commissioner Davenport?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, everyone else I can see, so if you have questions, if you will raise your hand. Is everybody familiar with raising your hand on this Zoom app? All right. Seeing no questions, do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I see you there.
Yeah, you would think that would, sorry, I was just trying to remember how to raise my hand. I see it now. I see the button.
Commissioner Wheeler is an excellent instructor.
I see the button.
He instructed me well.
The order indicates that we, if we need to spend money, appropriate and expend funds, make contracts, blah, 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 for emergency management purposes. How does that get done? Like, I'm assuming the mayor might be a central point of operation for helping us know like what some of the needs are. And I guess I'm just wondering how our body evaluates needs, becomes aware of needs, and needs to address funding changes and make sure that countyans feel reassured that, you know, we're going to financially support whatever emergency operations. I don't even really know what those are. I'm just wondering what that process looks like. If anybody's put any thought into that, do we have more of these types of meetings to kind of address them as they come up, or is that something that we can do? We can let the mayor do executive orders on that, or how do we handle that?
Is that question directed to me, Commissioner Jones?
If you know the answer.
Well, I have a thought of what my answer would be. You know, I think these meetings are limited to essential emergency items. So I would try to keep the agenda limited to these meetings to essential items to be considered. Allison, would you weigh in on that just a moment, please?
In front of you, I would direct you to page last page last, which is the third page. And that, even though you can't see all that detail, Commissioner Jones, I think that's what you're referring to. And the the emergency management powers give the county the power and authority to waive the procedures and formalities otherwise required of the political subdivision, which is the county, pertaining to, and I heard you say, entering into contracts, performance of public work, taking whatever prudent action is necessary to ensure the health, safety, and welfare of the community, incurring obligations, employment of permanent and temporary workers, and utilization of volunteer workers. And I think that you would, because there's a waiver of the usual practice, and obviously that's because of the exigent circumstances, you would not want Washington County to be unable to take the action under this emergency if it needed to, for example, enter into a contract for some sort of service. In hurricanes, a lot of times it's porta potties and things like this, FEMA trailers and this sort of thing. Obviously, with this pandemic, we don't maybe know what it would look like. I can imagine pop-up clinics, diagnostic clinics or something like that. And so because there is an allowance to waive the procedures and formalities otherwise required, which is resolutions, I think that's what's being addressed. And I think that that is open to some discussion, though I think the statute is very broadly stating that under the civil defense, with working with our local emergency management, that we want to give space for those decision makers to be able to do what they need to do, but always keeping in mind that it's subject to scrutiny. It will all be reviewed. It's all being recorded and accounted for. So, you may want to have some kind of review process so that you feel like you're kept advised as commissioners. That may be helpful to you to know what those are. I'm sure that those amounts are being quantified and recorded, and record keeping is very important, and I know has been a focus. I've heard from the Director of Accounts and Budgets and the emergency management. So since the statute contemplates a change in the process, you may wish to have some sort to consider review processes, maybe whatever you're comfortable with as a body, and what that would look like. Would you want it emailed? Obviously you don't want to make work, but I think maybe you could get some information to understand what's out there so that you feel advised and able to address your constituents and not be surprised on the back end.
If I can just respond to that, I think I really appreciate the mayor's work on all of our behalfs in getting some of this pulled together in a super fast and responsive way, and I expect that will need to continue. What we haven't been able to do, and unfortunately some of our meetings specific to internal communications were canceled because of all of this. Hopefully we can pull that together now that we have the means. What I would like us to do is come up with a strategy for internal communication so that when decisions are made that are kind of outside of normal, there's at least a routine way of communicating, even if it's just in a once a week email or something where we get a summary of some of the recent decisions, whether they be budget, policy, contracts, anything that maybe we would need to know. That would be really helpful. And I don't know if we can direct Ms. Saylor to do that in coordination with the mayor and other departments, or how that could be implemented. But, it feels tough as a elected official to respond to constituents' concerns and fears when I don't always know what all we are doing, and that's because it's being done in a time-sensitive and responsive manner. How do we get communications on that? I think a regular communication would be really helpful.
Muted. I concur with you. And, you know, I wanted to ask Allison a question while we were talking about what is appropriate. I think information is essential to the commissioners at this time because I know you all have a lot of broad questions. You know, if you live and represent constituents in the city, you may have different questions than Commissioner Harris would have, his constituents would have. So I really would like for us to really consider having a weekly call to where we can all gather here and just have a few moments that answer questions, and not necessarily the mayor try to answer all these questions, but try to have some of these officials here, if they can work that into their schedule, just to answer that question. I don't want to spend a lot of time with it, but still yet I think it's necessary for the commissioners to be able to provide answers to our constituents as well. So would you consider that the information sharing essential, Allison? I do.
Well, and one thing that I would say really supports your position is the fact that these executive orders expire after 7 days. So I think that could be instructive for you to consider timing. And if you're talking about weekly, then as one expired, that might be a good time for commissioners to have some sort of an accounting or an update. Were contracts entered? Were obligations incurred? Were temporary or other workers employed? Were volunteered? You know, just all of these things. That might be a way to keep everybody advised, because that is the time period that any of these orders last anyway. So I think that's very consistent with the statute.
Thank you, Allison. Is there any further questions or discussion, or do we have a motion? Commissioner Wheeler?
I'm not sure I understand what type of motion you're looking for.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. My internet stopped working for a moment.
Mr. Chairman, what I was asking was, I'm not sure what type. Is it necessary for us to vote on this at all?
I don't see that it's necessary. I'm just here at the will of the commission. Allison, do you think it's necessary to take a vote on this action? I mean,
have to take action to do that, but I do think that it may address the concerns that you're expressing, which is to have an understanding and what would that be. And I just think that if you did want to do something like that, 7 days is the timing of the order, and that way the commission would be advised with each order what had been undertaken in conjunction with it.
Commissioner Wheeler?
All right. Even if we vote in support of this, a vote in support of this declaration doesn't outline the waiver that's talked about in that paragraph. So we would have to flesh that out in a great deal more detail if we were trying to do that this evening, would we not? To direct that to the attorney.
It could, and I guess that's the reason I bring that up is we don't have to take a vote on anything this evening. I always like to lay out all the options on the table, and those options be a matter of discussion before we vote or move on. If there's any, and make sure that everybody else has their questions answered further, if there is any on this particular matter. Commissioner Jones?
I was just thinking we would pass a resolution to have a weekly meeting, not to vote on the executive order, but to agree that we meet at the termination of each executive, at the end of each 7-day period, to reassess, learn what was going on, and to the extent that we vote on it, I feel like we would know how in agreement we are on that level of engagement. That's kind of asking, it's going above what we normally do, although some of those meetings could be quite brief. It might be useful to do that.
I agree. Is that your motion?
Sure, I'd make a motion that we have a weekly call to discuss updates and new information regarding the emergency order.
Let's second that.
Commissioner Wheeler seconded the motion. Okay, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for discussion. I will call on those first that I cannot see to see if you have any questions or discussion. Commissioner Harris?
I'll be a yes vote on that.
All right. I just wanted, did you have any questions or discussion?
No, I think it's a good thing. Yeah, if we can be updated every
Okay.
week.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you very well. Commissioner
Okay,
Tester, did you have any questions or discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's a good idea too. Just one comment, it might make sense timing wise to do it before one expires and before a new one is issued. Might make more sense than after a new one is issued. I don't know. That's just my initial thought.
Well, this is Commissioner Williams. Can I say something?
Let me ask the attorney just a question real quick, Commissioner Williams, for Commissioner Tester. Allison, do you think we should do it before the order expires or would that be afterward? I mean, how would you do that? As far as scheduling the meeting goes.
I would want to be really clear. If the purpose of the meeting is to have an understanding, then it's basically, I would want you to have everything under the order to be considered in some sort of report. I do want to just remind you that the mayor does have the authority to declare the emergency. So just for just for purposes of if what Commissioner Tester was thinking about, as though each of those meetings would be permissive for that purpose, that would not be something that I think you want, a road you want to go down. So, but I think that it would be helpful if you knew everything that occurred out under any given order. So if you did it in advance, you wouldn't want to do it, for example, 4 days in. That's why I'm struggling over that a little bit.
Chairman, this is Commissioner Tester.
Yes, sir.
I understand what she's saying, and I don't necessarily disagree. I was just thinking it'd be maybe nice to know, ahead of time if it's going to be issued again, or what I'm saying, if something's going to be renewed or whatever, instead of just hearing it in the news kind of thing.
Right.
And that could be addressed.
I agree. No, you go ahead.
Well, I just was going to, that's why I think you wouldn't want to be, midway into the order. You'd want to have something that was meaningful to look back at those 7 days, to have some real understanding. And I think as close as you come to that 6th and 7th day will serve you all the better. And then you would have that opportunity for the mayor to bring you up to speed, to have that, his thoughts about where he was headed, so that you could accomplish what Commissioner Tester is describing, knowing in advance of any declaration.
Thank you. Any more questions, Commissioner Tester?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams?
Well, and in listening to what's taken place thus far, I just want to point out, it just may be at the end of 7 days that from Governor Lee on down, the wording of what comes out may be different, and it may be more of an order than a strong suggestion, which was some of the wording that Bill Lee used. So I think it's very important that at the end of the 7 days, we know what it's going to be going forward. The death rate and number of cases may increase to the point that it's going to be a stronger order, and we need to comply.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Carragher?
No questions.
All right. Commissioner Davenport?
No questions on this. This is a little off topic, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Do we want to take any vote on a resolution that the things that the mayor and our other county officials has put in place, and just take a vote showing that the county commission is backing their decision and not just leaving them out there on the island? You know, I think they're in a very tough position. I respect what they're doing, and I don't know. I think at some point, and I know this is a little off of what we're voting on right now, but I thought I would take that time to say that. So that's my question to the group, and we can take it up later. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else with any questions or comments before we take the vote? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Harris,
Yes.
Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Davenport,
Yes.
Matherly,
Yes.
England,
Yes.
Malone,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carragher,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Tester,
Yes.
McAllister,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Yes.
Ford.
Yes.
14 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. The motion passes. All right, our next item is item 4, is the Safer at Home Directive and closure of non-essential businesses and services. I guess we'll put that on the floor for discussion, or I think that the Mayor, before we get into this discussion, was there anything else, or you want to add or comment about the Safer at Home discussion?
No, not at this time, Mr. Chairman. It's I guess this is an initiative that was begun in Davidson County as their positive cases ramped up early. Williamson County was pretty close behind. As you know, that's Franklin right there, pretty close to Davidson County in the middle part of the state, which is where the highest number of positive cases were for the longest time, and I think still are. It was followed shortly thereafter by Shelby County, and then a number of other counties across the state have adopted a measure that's very similar in form to what you see, all really based on that Homeland Security Directive that came out, defining the essential businesses. So this particular order was built around the order that the city of Johnson City put forward, really for the main purpose of being consistent, since about 93% of the Washington County businesses are located within the city limits. It seemed to make sense that we had a directive that was very much a mirror image of the city of Johnson Cities in order to eliminate confusion of having two orders in the same county and then which order took precedence. So with that backdrop, I'll be quiet and listen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll go ahead and just take some questions initially on this order first. And let me go ahead and start with those that's on the call. Commissioner Harris, did you have any questions or concerns?
Chairman, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. I can hear you.
Okay. My phone's been breaking up a little bit. I guess this would be sort of towards the mayor, because I know he's dealt with and talked to a lot of these other counties, and I know some counties put some of these programs in place, the safer at home or stay at home, whatever the orders have been prior to now. Like you said, Davidson County, Williamson County. I guess it would be a sort of a twofold question. Is number one, is any of those counties that he's talked to, are there things that they're doing that we could do to help our businesses and people who are losing their job or businesses shut down from a county standpoint? And I guess the question number two I would have is, I spoke to a lady yesterday who actually lost her job 2 weeks ago because the place she worked at, her restaurant, just shut down because they didn't have any business, with the takeout stuff. And she's been having a terrible time trying to sign up for unemployment, she said, because she goes onto this site and it keeps kicking her off because it's, I don't know, some kind of a change, but what kind of communications would we have locally with the people who run these unemployment offices? Or do we have people that could maybe assist some of these people like her and like me, who's not really computer savvy, but, do we have maybe a way that we could assist some of those people to make sure that they're doing it the right way and getting help? Because a lot of people are just living paycheck to paycheck. And when we close down these businesses, I feel for the people who, they can't pay their rent, their mortgage, or car payment. They're just living on really tight means. So that's the question I would have, sort of a twofold question.
As usual, that's a great question, and it's really very considerate of people. So generally, the funding for people that have lost their jobs is through this unemployment. One of the very first things that I did with respect to that was to reach out to both Congressman Rowe as well as the folks that manage these job centers at the state level to be sure that the funding was in place. Because one of the things that did happen last year, I sit on this AD&T board, which administers the American Job Centers, which are located in each county in the First Tennessee Development District, and are what probably a lot of us would refer to as unemployment agencies. So they are physical facilities. One of the very first things that happened out of the state level was they said they closed them to the public and sent everybody home. So unfortunately, when people are needing help the most, there's nobody in these job centers to help them. So they are answering phone calls and so forth and trying to help people. But as you can imagine, what you get on the phone most of the time when you call is the head load of inquiries, we're backlogged. So I have talked to Kathy Pierce, who administers that locally, and she has really for the last week been ramping up the support for people. So that should get better. There is funding there, and it will be backdated. Of course, that for people who live paycheck to paycheck, that doesn't help them so much buy groceries this week, but they will be able to be covered or pay for their job loss retroactively. And the whole system has gone from where you used to be able to go into a center and stand behind a counter and have somebody help you. Today it's all online. And these American Job Centers, all they do really is assist people to get online and to get the application filled out so that they can start getting paid. Not a great answer, but I don't think, I'm not aware of anything at the county level that we can do. It's a state administered program. The funding is comes out of the state, and it's being back enhanced by the federal government, according to Congressman Rowe. So I feel like that's where that is today. It's not a fantastic answer, but that is the current status on it as of last Friday was the last time I talked to Kathy Pierce about that. With respect to local business, I'm sure that you've everybody's seen that the federal government has passed huge reconstructive actions from a financial perspective for local businesses that are suffering because of this. So there will be small business loans that, for the most part, will be forgiven, according to what I'm reading, particularly for employers that maintain their existing payrolls and personnel. So there will be a lot of money flowing down to small business, mostly out of the federal government, is the way I understand it today.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can hear you now, Commissioner.
Okay. I guess just the one thing I would like to throw out there, and I know we're going to have more meetings and things are going to happen, but there's a lot of people who, when they have to go online to file unemployment or go online to file for help for their business, they get frustrated. And this one lady told me that she tried 3 times and never would go through, and I can see how stuff like that happens. And I just wonder if it's something that, as time goes on, that we could look at from the county standpoint to make sure that we had somebody maybe that could make sure these people are getting the money that's out there for them when it comes to unemployment or small businesses. And I know the mayor's overworked now as it is, but I wish we could look at finding someone to help those people to make sure that they can get the maximum benefits that they're entitled to through this.
Mr. Chairman, if I might say, actually, that would probably be very helpful if, for all the commissioners who might take a call from somebody like that, if there's a way you could capture the information, the person's phone number and other contact information and name and everything, we will find a way to reach out to those individuals who get in touch with you to be sure that they have, in fact, finally gotten online and gotten the situation straightened out. Be happy to do that and facilitate it.
Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Harris?
No, I appreciate the mayor doing that. I know he's got so many other things going on. I hate to put it off on him, but maybe as time goes on, we could look at if we have to hire somebody. To me, it'd be worth it to have somebody that could just deal with people to make sure they get the help they need, sort of like we have with our veteran service officer, somebody that could make sure just on a part-time basis that these people who don't know how to operate these computers and things get the proper help, because a lot of people are going to be hurting, if that's the case. But I appreciate it. Thank you.
I will plan to assign that task at some point, and it would be really helpful if those communications about those individuals could come. But I'll be glad to funnel them, but if they can come to me by email or some other way that we can get a record of it, that would be really helpful rather than just a phone call.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Tester?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm here.
Okay. I just wanted to go ahead and just kind of weigh in on the safe at home on our last item. I know that I think you wanted to speak on that one.
Yes, and I'll echo what Commissioner Harris just said a few minutes ago. I think that's a good idea if we can try to help people with that. And I guess kind of in line with what Commissioner Williams was saying earlier, and this is part of what I talked to the mayor on the phone earlier today about. What our governor issued yesterday is worded more as an urgent request or recommendation, whereas our county directive was worded basically as if it was mandatory. And that concerns me. It brings up a lot of issues with enforcement. And as we've been talking about, you know, people are already afraid and scared and, you know, desperate, losing jobs, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I'm just worried or concerned about, you know, where all this is going, especially depending on how long it all takes or, you know, how long it could possibly go on. And, I guess a little concern that heavy-handed government may do more harm, than less heavy-handed government, for lack of a better way of saying that. And nothing personal against our mayor. And I talked to him earlier today. I appreciate the things that he's been doing, and I give him the benefit of a doubt that he's, you know, everybody's trying to do what they think is best. But it just honestly, it just doesn't sit well with me that one person can order all the citizens in our county, you know, to do or not do these things that, you know, that's in this order. And it just seems kind of wrong to me in America, that that's the way our government works. And I realize everybody on this phone call probably will have varying opinions on this. But to me, government can't keep everybody safe from everything. I mean, that's impossible. And ultimately, it seems to me that government's role is not really that, you know, keeping everybody safe from everything as much as it is protecting everybody's liberty and unalienable rights. And I know those are kind of foundational American principles. But just, and I had this, I guess, conversation with him last week too, that it's like, as long as all this stuff stays preventative, everybody's trying to be precautionary, and trying to do what we can to limit the spread of this and everything. I think that's all great. But when we start trying to make it mandatory, and then especially when we start trying to talk about enforcing it, or if you're going to enforce it, or how you're going to enforce it, we get kind of into, I don't know, troublesome territory, it seems to me like. And I guess that just concerns me that, I mean, our wording of our directive was basically mandatory, whereas the governor's yesterday was more along the lines of an urgent request or recommendation. For my opinion, I guess I just wish we would stick to that level of urgent request instead of trying to say this stuff's mandatory. But I'll be quiet and let whoever else weigh in, I guess. That's what I wanted to say.
Can I say something? Hello?
You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Wheeler. Let me ask the mayor if he would like to respond about the safe at home order. Or did you have any comment about as far as enforcement goes, Mayor?
I requested to say something.
Yes, ma'am. I'm just trying to get Commissioner Tester. I wanted to see if the mayor wanted to answer Commissioner Tester's question, or had anything for the comments. If not, we'll move to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I would just say that our first responders, all of them, are well taxed, as you would know better than anyone, and adding additional duties and responsibilities to them would certainly not be something I would like to see happen, other than to allow them to have an additional tool that they could use in the event that it served them in their line of duty.
Thank you. Commissioner Williams, I'm sorry if you have the floor.
Okay. Listen, our county attorney expressed that what has taken place from the state is just for 7 days. And I think toward the end of that, there may be a reevaluation as to whether it was enough or not enough. And it might need to be reworded or redesigned. I just want to emphasize that. Certainly, let's try this very gentle way of encouragement, but it might have to get a little stronger.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Carragher?
No questions.
Commissioner Davenport?
No questions.
All right, everybody else on the screen, if you have a question, if you'll indicate by raising your hand. Commissioner Malone?
No, I'm grateful for the efforts, and it is easy to second guess sometimes. When I read the order, the only thing that caused me to scratch my head, and this may be a question for our county attorney or the other attorney on the call, but when I read it, I did go, wow, don't I have a constitutional right to assemble? And the mass gatherings thing, of course, I know what the goal is, and I know that I don't think there's anything nefarious going on at any level, county, state, or federal, but you know, at some level, that one specifically did seem to be taking away constitutional rights, and I just wondered how far could you actually take that when the Constitution says we have a right to assemble. And I'm assuming somebody has already asked that question, so Allison may want to address it. And I mean, I'm fine with this stuff. I'm grateful for all the work that's been done and is being done. And it did strike me as comical a little bit that we got one commissioner saying, hey, this went too far. And I think I just heard Commissioner Williams say, it may need to be more, you know, just an observation. But Allison or Jim?
Commissioner Wheeler, I see you with your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, rather. I do have a couple of questions, and I think it may kind of piggyback and then make it easier for the county attorney to answer these at the same time, or the mayor. First of all, I wanted to mention that the mayor mentioned earlier Williamson County, and I had looked at their website today, and their website actually says that their county mayor is not issued this kind of order specifically because they found that he didn't have the authority to do that. My question for the county attorney is going to be, what authority are we specifically, what authority, because we've all been trained, county can't do anything unless the state's authorized us to. What authority allows us to take this from a strongly urging to a are required? Because I'm concerned, you mentioned that it's a tool for law enforcement. And I'm very worried that if law enforcement enforces this against an individual, that we might have a civil rights case on our hands, because I can't find anything in any of the statutes that are mentioned in either the emergency declaration or the Safer at Home. In fact, there are no statutes cited to authorize the Safer at Home order. I can't find anything that allows the county mayor to do that. as opposed to a city chief administrative officer, whether it's the mayor or the administrator. They've got a specific statute that allows a municipality to issue those kinds of orders. But I can't find anything that allows counties. So I would ask both the county attorney and the mayor to address that. But I'd like to know specifically, where's the authority to do this?
Allison, if you can give us that response, I think that would be that would clear up both those questions from Commissioner Malone and Commissioner Wheeler.
Yes, sir. Well, first, let me just start with what Commissioner Wheeler addressed about authority generally. And if you'll just forgive me, I'm going to always try to tether everything to authority, because so just if you hear me on this. So recently, when I was working on some open meetings issues, I came across a case, and it said that we are not unmindful of the fact that the county court, which was BYAL, the legislative body, or just the county generally, can exercise no power that is not conferred expressly or by clear implication by the legislature, and that would be the Tennessee legislature in this instance. So the reason I kept a copy of this on my desk is because it says this proposition is so well settled that cases need not be cited to support it. So, I mean, I'm just telling you that sometimes there's a circle of things we just take for granted. And that it's true that in the county government, the county can take no action that is not expressly given to it. I would like to be very mindful of talking about executive orders, and with your permission, particularly Commissioner Wheeler, the way you framed that, I hope that to address this going forward about how I wouldn't want to comment on how the county would defend a civil rights case, for example. So if you'll just keep that in mind, that these are comments going forward that I think we would want to consider. I'm looking at the Declaration of State of Emergency statute, and it is that the county mayor may, in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, issue orders, and that's plural orders. And it's about evacuation, I will tell you that, for what the public health, safety, and welfare issue orders to direct and compel the evacuation of the area of their county or any portion thereof. So I would say, for example, if we as a county had circumstances that were creating public health, safety, and welfare issues, and there did want to be an additional order, again, consistent with what Commissioner Williams was talking about, then I think certainly going forward, the last thing we would want to do is violate anyone's due process. That there's procedural due process that requires certain procedures before a law is applied, which is notice or the opportunity to be heard. But there's also substantive due process, and that is what looks at the validity of the law being applied. And I think that's the analysis that I'm hearing from Commissioner Tester, which is, before depriving someone, and Commissioner Malone, before depriving someone of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That's the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which of course is mirrored in the Tennessee Constitution. So sometimes courts consider the interests that are affected, but they will consider the government's interest as well. And that emergency situations in which postponing and notice does not deny due process, say the courts sometimes, and they can go back then and look at the substantive issue at play. So I would say that substantive due process is not going to offer, is not unlikely to offer any greater protections than that. But where the government doesn't discriminate against minorities or curtail certain fundamental rights, the courts will typically use what is called in the cases a rational basis review, looking at the scrutiny is whether or not the law, which in this instance would be the order, be rationally related to the legitimate government interest. And so that's, I think, the way that we as a county would want to structure our orders. And I know that's a lot of really dense, abstract information, but I'm trying to touch on the constitutional issues that you've raised and maybe put some bumpers on what we'd want to consider, that if we found in the county a heightened level of need, then the rational basis review would say that there could be a heightened effort that would be articulated. But I do think that it would be beneficial for everyone to comment on what the expectation is on a future order, so that, you know, and certainly the mayor would tailor that to what he saw as the need. I heard him say today that it was the medical association and the changes that were happening, I guess, between Friday and or the last 3 or 4 days, that information then changes the circumstances. And we always want our actions as a county to be related to the actual circumstances, and that the actions that county takes are reasonable in light of those circumstances. I hope that's not too much information.
Mr. Wheeler?
Of course, we can't get to a rational basis review if the underlying order wasn't legal to begin with. So the question I go back to, I mean, that statute on evacuation, I don't see how you could parlay that into authorizing the shelter in place. The state statutes give the governor authority to do that. They give municipal mayors or chief administrative officers explicit authority to do that. That statute doesn't begin to give the mayor the authority to do that.
I think that's totally fair, and that's why I'm saying going forward, I want you to realize that's what that order would allow. And if we wanted to do something different, then we would want to consider other ways in which to do that. That would, be within the declarations. I do think going back to just let me put it in front of me, going back to the declaration itself, that certainly if the legislative body, if the governing body were to waive procedures and formalities once this emergency has been declared, remember that entering into contracts, incurring obligations, employment, permanent temporary workers, utilization of volunteers, and rental of equipment, distribution, appropriation, expenditure of public funds, those are the items that can be done outside of the ordinary course of conducting business. So I would say that is the framework we would want to use going forward, if that provides more comfort to the issue of concern over these directives. That said, I know I've had some conversations, and we do not live in a country that says that emergency circumstances throw out the rules, but I do think that we would be looking at any screen in light of a pandemic where we know that any individual may be 3 people away from a diagnosis. And so I don't know, there will be litigation over this somewhere, and someday there will be an answer, but it's just, there's nothing guiding us now for this. I completely take the point, it's not an evacuation, but that's what's in the statute. So I just wanted to share that as one of the parameters, and then the other one about what can be done without the ordinary process in place.
Mr. Jones, did you have your hand raised?
I'll just withdraw my comments. I'm good.
All right. Was there any further discussion or questions on this item?
Yes, this is Brian. I guess I come out closer to where Susie does, but again, we have people in the mayor's position all over the country trying to direct people. And whether, I don't think we've arrested anybody or broken up anything. Of course, the order doesn't go into effect, I don't think, until tomorrow or midnight tonight. But it's easy to sit back and say we've overstepped our bounds. Well, if you look at information in other places where they've overstepped their bounds, they've had a positive reaction to this. We don't know how bad this can go. And if we put our leaders, like our mayor, in a position that before he makes any statement, has to get it cleared, it can be too late to make those statements. And I think by putting something out there saying this is what we need to do, this is what we're putting in place, most people are law-abiding citizens, and they'll go by that. And, you know, to be worried about a lawsuit or something like that in this time, I don't think is something we need to worry about. This is spreading. This is deadly. We talk about people being scared. People really get scared when that comes our way. And if we ever get like Nashville, let alone New York, that's when panic will set in. And if we can do things to intervene to keep that from happening, I applaud anybody that steps up and leads like that. And so instead of really knocking a decision that a leader is going to make, I'm more of a proponent of stepping up and supporting it. That's just my point.
All right. Is there any further points or discussion on that item? Commissioner Jones?
Just to concur with Commissioner Davenport's comments, I had the same thoughts in my head, and also kind of was thinking about how our orders are commensurate with that of the city, which is a bit easier on the whole county than having two separate sets of orders, at least in my opinion, and especially knowing that he worked across multiple counties to pull that together and kind of level set a system for the region. It sort of just common sense wise, and I feel like that's where we're at in terms of using our best judgment in this crisis. That's where we have to be, I think. So thank you for that.
Thank you. All right. We know that this order will expire in 7 days. Is there any further comment or discussion about it? All right, seeing none, I want to be sure and thank everyone for being part of this call this evening, but I especially want to thank the mayor and his hard work that he's been doing every day and every night. And we appreciate the good job you're doing, Mayor. We also want to thank Sherry and Allison and Teresa and Susan for all the work they've been doing to get this together and get these packets out to you. What a great job they're doing. And as you know, we do have some committee meetings coming up on Thursday. And Allison, we do have another meeting scheduled Thursday evening. Is that correct?
That would be the will of the commission, absolutely. And if I may bring to your attention, one of the issues that has been referenced here a couple of times is the work county officials are doing and the shift that has occurred between when we first found out that this indeed was a pandemic in the area and how to handle employment issues. So you will be receiving an email tomorrow with draft language of an addendum to the employee handbook, which will address the ways that Washington County is working to record those employees who are either taking time under expanded federal law, which was passed the 18th, 19th of this month, or also other ways. I've heard some of you talk about making sure that county employees were safe with their jobs. So you'll be on the lookout for that. And Commissioner McAllister, as chair of the Employee Compensation Committee, has put that on his agenda for consideration on Thursday. And then it can be considered in a special call meeting if you'd like to address that as to when that would be. But comment would need to be in the committee meeting with approval in the commission, not a rewrite to follow the statute.
I'd like to just add that they would be temporary changes to the personnel, that is specifically related to this pandemic that we're dealing with. Is that correct?
That is correct.
If we could back up just a moment and make sure as we finish up here and close that everybody that's on the call with us has an opportunity to if they had any concerns before we leave. Commissioner Harris, did you have anything you would like to add before we close?
Are you still there, Chairman?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to know, did you have anything to add before we close?
I appreciate you, and I just want to let all of you all know that you're all in my prayers and thoughts. And I'm one of the people who sometimes has had chronic health conditions, so I've been more careful what I do. But me and my wife both have all the leaders for the county and the state on our prayer list. And if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. But I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Harris. Commissioner Tester?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure everybody understands that I was not at all trying to, make light of the efforts of anybody that's, the mayor or anything that's been done. And I'm definitely not trying to make light of the seriousness of this situation. But I was trying to look at it from a point of view of, balancing the seriousness of this situation and, trying to keep people safer from getting sick and that kind of thing with their fundamental constitutional rights that we have in our country. And like I said earlier, just concerned of where all this could and may go, as people are desperate and, stuck in their houses longer and longer. That just kind of concerns me. I have heard, and actually this was one question I wanted to ask of you, Chairman Madley, since you're director of 911, but I had heard from an officer that Whitney and I know that there had been more domestic violence calls recently in the last week or two, and that had been up. And that's some of the kind of things that, I was thinking about. And so I'll just use this opportunity to ask you to respond to that, and then I'll get off. I also have folks in my prayers, and I pray that we can all, that cooler heads can prevail from everybody on this, and then we can get through this and move on with our lives. So if you'll respond to that question about an increase in violence calls and stuff, I would appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for tonight and everything that you've been doing.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yes, it's a very interesting question. One of the things we have seen is somewhat of a spike in domestic violence. However, things overall, the call volume is down. I think people being at home and it just goes to show you how well our community is responding to staying at home. Even our medical call volume is down, I can't report to you what a great job our responders are doing out there on the street. And they're definitely putting their lives on the line every day. And I've been so proud just to see the response of the city and county agencies as well, and great cooperation, working together. And we have seen some spikes in different calls, domestic violence, shoplifting, those type calls. But however, overall the call volume is down, and our medical calls are down. So I've been excited about that. Commissioner Williams?
I'm fine with everything we've done. I wanted to ask a question. Did I understand we're going to have another night meeting this Thursday, or is that incorrect?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up again, Commissioner, so we can clarify that, yes, Thursday at 6 p.m., we will have another meeting. We do have some critical personnel issues that probably needs to be addressed and get those out of our way to correct our policy as we go forward. Allison, do you think there's anything you want to add to my answer?
No, sir. Just for everyone to check their emails tomorrow, and feel free to call me with any questions. And Michelle Stewart is very adept at explaining this as well. We'd be very happy to walk anyone through this process so that you have a very clear understanding of it to make the meeting go more efficiently with your time on Thursday evening.
Thank you. Commissioner Carragher?
No, Chairman Mattingly, I'll be glad when we get back together face to face.
Yes, sir, I will too. Commissioner Davenport, I see you now.
Yes, Chairman. I just want to go on record, the things we talked about, I want to go on record as supporting what our mayor has done to put our people first and to keep everybody safe, and the recommendations that's put out there, and talking about the number of people that should gather. I'm in full support of those decisions, and I really appreciate the leadership that he's shown through this tough time. So thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Malone?
No, I'm good. I'm grateful as well. I know these are challenging times, and it's hard to second guess emergency management. So I'm grateful, and I hope everybody is well. I've been thinking about Mike having to feed all the folks at the prison and still keeping those things functional. So I know each of us is facing this challenge in a different way. So I hope everyone is well.
Commissioner Ford?
I just want to say I have missed seeing Commissioner Carragher's face.
Oh, Lord, I think 5,000 copies out of work in Las Vegas, and we got one.
That's why I don't have anything.
Commissioner Jones?
I'll second all the things that Commissioner Davenport said. In fact, I had my hand raised earlier because I definitely would have supported a commission vote on that issue, but I don't want to belabor the point or make our meeting even longer. And I'll just speak on behalf of healthcare professionals in our region who I'm in touch with on a daily basis. They have completely reinvented how they work on a daily basis. They've had to, just from a grassroots level, completely reinvent processes and protocols and prepare to care for all the people we expect will be needing their care in the near future. And I know they really appreciate everything we're doing to keep operations going, and also really encourage people to stay at home as much as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner England? Commissioner England, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Wheeler?
I would echo the thanking the mayor. I know you didn't sign up for this, and nobody did, but you sure didn't, and the role you're playing. And I appreciate everything you're doing, and I know it's a hard spot. And I don't want anything I said earlier to take away from that. And I really, really appreciate what you're doing, and have all of you all in our prayers as well. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Commissioner McAllister?
Again, just echo everybody's comments. Thank everybody for being here. I did have one question. Don't get me too personal. Does anyone talk to Commissioner Light? I know he's not here tonight, but then I've tried to reach out to him a couple of times and haven't been able to talk to him this week. And I just hope he's okay and everything's all right with Steve. That was my only concern.
Commissioner Ford, have you talked to Commissioner Light?
Yesterday.
Okay.
He's doing, I talked to him yesterday and he probably just didn't get the notice of the meeting. I think his mailbox will be full.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Edens?
Carrier, I'm looking
You hit
forward
more
to
often.
all back in the same room together.
I agree. Yeah, I'll be glad for us to all be back together, and we just don't know how much we appreciate each other until we're on video. And I do miss each one of you for sure. Mayor, I'm going to leave the last word to you this evening.
Well, that's a scary thought there, but I will just say, I'd like to just echo for a second your comments earlier about our absolutely amazing professional emergency folks. And I'll just start off by saying our chairman is at the head of the pack right there. He is virtually had to reinvent 911 to deal with this situation, while keeping a team of people that are among the most critical in the community safe and healthy. If 911 is down, first responders are down because they do all the dispatch, and he runs an amazing operation, and he's worked tirelessly to pull things together. But so has our emergency management folks, Rusty and Evan. They really have stepped up and met this challenge. They've worked a lot of long hours. They've got the EOC up. Rusty, created a task force that's dealing with a homeless population. Now the task force has taken it over and it's off his list, but they've got a place to shelter, shower, whatever in Johnson City, if that's a requirement, trying to keep them together. He has worked through to arrange 2 dormitories available at East Tennessee State University for first responders in the event that a first responder becomes ill with the virus and it has to be sheltered away from his family or others. They have a place to go. There's another dormitory for just a place for first responders in the event they just need to go someplace and get some rest, or they have sick people at home where they can't go, and infect them. They work together. It's amazing. I'll just say that things change at an amazing rate of speed. It's we used to say day to day. Now it seems like it's hour to hour. And if all of this effort comes to just save one life, it'll be worth every single minute, hour, and dollar we put into it. To date, we haven't spent any significant additional funds, but there is the possibility that we may in the future, have to figure out a way to deal with this. A lot of which we expect to be reimbursed later by the federal government, but that is down the road. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the local food pantries. As you know, Second Harvest Food distributes food for multiple counties. We have other food pantries, none the least of which is one right here just down the street from us in Jonesboro that served, before this thing started, 21 families, and families are added every day to that demand. There may be an opportunity for us to step up and support them with a little bit of financial resources to replace their shelves. And I'll close by just saying, on a sad note, today or yesterday, we had the first death from this virus in the region confirmed. And so, right now it's all hands on deck in a very, very difficult, trying time. So I just want to say to everyone, Commissioner Harris, you're leading the way and doing the exactly right thing. Stay at home when you can, wash your hands a lot, take care of yourself, social distance, and stay out of groups when you can. So I appreciate the vote of support. It was a hard decision to make, but with a lot of support from our healthcare professionals in the region, I believe we've done the right thing to help preserve our resources in our healthcare system. So once again, thank you, and I appreciate you listening.
Thank you, Mayor. On behalf of the commission, we want to be sure and tell you that if you need us, don't hesitate to call. With that, we'll conclude. And if I could have a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Commissioner McAllister. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second made by Commissioner Malone. Unfortunately, we can't take a voice vote, so Madam Clerk, who has been awesome, and I really appreciate her taking the time to help us through this, would you call the roll, Madam Clerk, and we'll be adjourned.
Harris,
Yes.
Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Davenport,
Yes.
Matherly,
Yes.
England,
Yes.
Malone,
Yes.
Williams,
Yes.
Carriger,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Hester,
Yes.
McAllister,
Yes.
Wheeler,
No.
You're out of order.
He's certainly outvoted.
What the heck?
Okay. I'm going to say 14 yes. 13 yes and 1 no. How about that?
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I will call us adjourned.
Thank you.
Night, y'all.
They didn't pass the plate.
Good night.